Once a week?
Yeah.
That's a lot of fish and chips. It's not very healthy though, is it?
That's why I put weight on and now I've to slim to lose it all off.
Britain is addicted to fish and chips, but it is also one of the culprits making Britain unhealthy and obese. If you have lived here long enough, you will understand why these two things exist side by side. Fish and chips is not just food, it is habit, it is memory. And because of that, very few people ever stop to ask a simple question: where is it safe to eat and where should you avoid? Not all fish and chips are the same. There are places where you finish eating and still feel light, can still go for a walk, still sleep well. But there are also places where just one lunch is enough to leave you drained for the entire afternoon. Same fish, same potatoes. But the experience and how you feel afterwards are worlds apart. I live in Britain, I eat fish and chips, and I also work in health. This is a very direct ranking from worst to best based on real eating experiences, real physical reactions, and a health perspective once you are past the age of 50. Watch this before your next fish and chips meal. Number 1. Wetherspoon. Fish and chips is not something I usually associate with danger. It is familiar, food comfort food, a dish tied to many good memories for British people. But when you look specifically at the fish and chips at Wetherspoon, especially from a health perspective for those over 50, this is the option that concerns me the most on this entire list. Wetherspoon is almost everywhere in Britain. For many retired people, it is such a familiar pub that it requires no thought at all. Cheap prices, easy access, a space quiet enough to sit and talk, and a menu everyone knows. Fish and chips here is often seen as a safe choice, filling and reliable, especially at lunchtime or early evening. That familiarity is exactly why many people eat it weekly without asking any further questions. If we talk purely about how it tastes, I will not deny that it has some decent points. The cod or haddock is usually fried golden, the batter reasonably crisp, the fish inside still soft. With tartar sauce, it goes down quite easily. This is not a dish that makes you wince at the first bite, but problems appear very quickly as you continue eating, especially the chips. Chips at Wetherspoon are often soft, slightly limp and heavy with oil, and when you place this meal on a health scale, everything becomes much clearer. One portion of fish and chips at Wetherspoon usually sits around 1,280, 8 to 1,395 kcal. For most people over 50 who are less active, that already accounts for almost an entire day's energy intake. But calories are not the biggest issue. What puts Wetherspoon in this position is salt. The salt content of one portion can reach 6.5 to 7.3 grain, which is more than 100% of the recommended maximum daily intake, from just one meal without adding anything else. This is not a new issue either. Wetherspoon has been repeatedly highlighted by public health campaigns for the high salt levels in its pub meals, including fish and chips. Even children's meals have previously been used by the media as examples of food that is excessively salty. That shows this is a systemic issue, not an isolated incident. For a body over 50, this level of salt is not just a number on paper. It can raise blood pressure on the same day, cause water retention, mild swelling, a heavy head, and disturbed sleep in the evening. When combined with oil and large portion sizes, many people also experience reflux, slow digestion, and fatigue that carries into the next day. If this is something you eat weekly, the effects build up very quickly. I want to be clear and fair. If I were speaking purely as a food critic, Wetherspoon's ranking might be different. Their fish is not bad, the price is reasonable, and the environment suits older customers. But as a health professional, I have to look at the real impact on the body. And from that perspective, this is a fish and chips meal that is too salty, too heavy, and too easily becomes a risky habit for people over 50. That is why Wetherspoon sits at the very bottom of this list. Let us move on to the next name, which is slightly less bad, but still not good enough for me to return a second time. Number 2, Deep Blue Restaurants. There are fish and chips places where you finish eating and still hesitate, thinking maybe the kitchen was just off today. But there are also places where after just a few bites, you know one thing very clearly: there is no need to come back. For me, Deep Blue falls firmly into the second category, not because it is dangerous, not because it is trying to be challenging, but simply because the quality is too poor to warrant any further thought. Deep Blue is a name that sounds very by the book. A large chain, tidy signage present in many towns and cities. For many people, especially older customers, names like this bring a sense of reassurance. You walk in with very basic expectations, a hot, crisp portion of fish and chips that leaves you comfortably full. And because the expectations are so basic, the disappointment becomes even more obvious when the food arrives. The problem with Deep Blue is not in complex details. It fails at the most basic level. The fish is often no longer hot when it reaches the table, especially for takeaway. The batter is not crisp but soft, soggy and greasy. The chips are limp, oil-soaked, and instead of tasting fresh, they feel heavy in the mouth. Some portions give off a noticeable smell of old oil before you even start eating. The fish lacks firmness and flakes apart too easily, losing that fresh texture. Seasoning is inconsistent, sometimes bland, sometimes overly salty, with none of the basic consistency you would expect from a large chain. What is most unpleasant is how quickly disappointment sets in. It is not the kind of meal where you eat a lot and only then feel fed up. It is a few bites in and you already know something is wrong. You lose interest in continuing and eat only because you have already paid, or because you do not want to waste food. Fish and chips is a simple dish, but when it is cold, soggy and oily, there is no need to even discuss nutrition or health. It is simply not good and not worth it. The biggest issue with Deep Blue is inconsistency. Some people say one branch is just about acceptable, but many others eat at a different branch and have a completely opposite experience. Same brand, but entirely different quality from place to place. I do not want to gamble every time I eat out, and that is why I cross this name off my list of chains I can trust. And now let us move straight on to the third name on the list, which comes with a completely different kind of issue. Number 3, the Ashvale. There are fish and chips dishes where you do not even need to take a bite. Just seeing the plate placed on the table already makes you feel slightly tired on behalf of your stomach. The Ashvale is exactly that type. Not because it is salty, not because it is dirty, but because it is simply too much too big and designed more as a challenge than a normal meal. And for a body that has passed the age of 50, that is something worth stopping to think about. The Ashvale is a very well-loved name in Scotland, long established, familiar and carrying the true spirit of a family chippy. But when people mention Ashvale, almost everyone first mentions one thing: the Ashvale whale. A massive piece of fish weighing around 450 grams before you even count the chips and sides. Finish it all and you are rewarded with a free dessert or another dish. It sounds fun, exciting, and for many younger people it is simply an entertaining experience to talk about later. The problem is that when a meal is linked to a reward for eating as much as possible, it stops being dinner. It becomes a food challenge. Food challenges are made for bodies that are younger, stronger, with fast digestion and quick recovery. But once you pass 50, your body does not respond the same way. Digestion slows, blood sugar reacts more sharply, and the feeling of overload comes very quickly. If you have ever sat in front of an Ashvale whale, you will understand how this unfolds. The first bite is quite good, even enjoyable. Fresh fish batter done in the Scottish style, but by the second and third bites, the feeling starts to change. It is no longer enjoyment, it is eating, because there is still so much left. Halfway through the plate, your body starts to speak up. Fullness, heaviness, slower breathing. Yet many people continue, not because they are hungry, but because it would be a waste, because they ordered it, because it is a challenge. And that mindset is what is most dangerous for people over 50. You do not lose because the food is bad, but because you are trying to win a game, your body is no longer suited to play. Eating too much in one sitting pushes blood sugar sharply upward, leading to fatigue that lasts all afternoon. The digestive system is overworked, causing slow digestion, reflux and heaviness well into the evening. Many people finish the meal wanting only to lie down, then struggle to sleep that night because their stomach still has not settled. And what is worth reflecting on is that the next chain on the list is not oversized like this at all. There is no challenge involved, but its problem lies elsewhere, more subtle and far more likely to make people underestimate it. Number 4. Harry Ramsden's. There is a very strange feeling that I keep hearing again and again from many people when they leave Harry Ramsden's these days. Not anger, not frustration, but emptiness. The kind of feeling where you have just finished a meal that should have made you happy, yet all you can think was that it. For a name that was once a symbol of British fish and chips, that feeling is more sad than irritating. What makes many people notice the change at Harry Ramsden's fastest is not actually the food, but the bill. Prices are no longer cheap, and in many places they are even higher than the average of a good chippy. That in itself is not a problem. Many people are perfectly willing to pay more for a brand that was once legendary. But when the food arrives and the experience does not live up to that price, the sense of disappointment appears almost immediately. Not because it is terrible, but because it is not worthy. One very distinctive thing about Harry Ramsden's, which few other chains have, is its heavy presence in supermarkets. Frozen battered fish, frozen chips, the familiar logo everywhere on the shelves. For older people, this is completely understandable. A familiar name, familiar memories, something quick and convenient to buy. But that is exactly what makes the brand feel ordinary. When you are used to the frozen version at home and then return to the restaurant expecting something special, the gap becomes even clearer. The sense of legend is slowly worn away without you realizing it. Only then do people begin to remember the Harry Ramsden's of the past. Seaside trips, family meals, the feeling that fish and chips was once a source of very British pride. Not everyone ate there often, but almost everyone knew the name. That glorious past makes the present harder to accept. If this were a new brand, people might be far more forgiving. So, what about the actual eating experience? It is not a disaster. The fish is usually not bad, but it rarely reaches the level of crispness people hope for. The chips often lack freshness, soften quickly, and fail to stand out. Everything feels safe, but also too bland. You finish eating, and that is it. There is no urge to tell anyone about it, and no clear reason to return. For a name once spoken with pride, that is a worrying sign. The core issue with Harry Ramsden's today is that it relies heavily on memory. Memory gets people through the door, but current quality is not strong enough to keep them there. And when I think about the next chain on this list, my thoughts are no longer about the past or nostalgia, but about how modern brands are doing fish and chips in a completely different way. It looks progressive, but hides its own problems that many people do not notice. Are you curious about number 5 on this list? Number 5, Fishworks. To be completely honest, Fishworks is a name that leaves me quite confused. Not because it is bad, but because it makes you uncertain. You walk in feeling like you are choosing something better, more civilized, more proper than ordinary fish and chips. The fish is displayed beautifully, looks fresh. The space is bright, and the way they talk about ingredients sounds very convincing. At this age, I understand why many people think eating here must be gentler on the body. But then the fish and chips arrives, and a familiar feeling returns very quickly. The batter is still thick, still deep fried, still crisp on the outside, but heavy after just a few bites. The fish is indeed better, firmer, with a cleaner flavour than many standard chippies. But to be honest, when everything is wrapped in the same old fried batter, your body does not care much whether the fish was more expensive or sustainably sourced. This is where Fishworks becomes frustrating. The ingredients say premium seafood restaurant, but the cooking tells a different story. It is like wearing a beautiful suit with shoes that do not fit. Each element is fine on its own, but together it does not feel complete. You finish eating and realise you still feel full, heavy and slow, just as you would after fish and chips from any oil-heavy fryer. What about the price? I do not think that is the main issue. Better fish costs more, and that is normal. Older diners are not opposed to paying extra for a decent meal, but at that price point, what people really expect is a clear difference in how they feel afterwards. When you pay restaurant prices, you expect your body to be treated like it is in a restaurant, not left with the familiar heaviness of fast food. And here, Fishworks does not deliver what many quietly hope for. One more point, small but impossible to ignore, is service. It is not always bad, but there has been enough feedback for me to take note. At times, the staff can feel slightly cold, slightly rushed, lacking the warmth that older customers often need to feel comfortable. When the food is already heavy and the atmosphere is not welcoming, the meal quickly loses appeal no matter how good the ingredients are. So for me, Fishworks is not a chain to avoid at all costs, but it is also not the healthy choice many people imagine. It sits here because of the clear mismatch between what the brand wants to communicate and what your body actually receives. The fish may be higher quality, the experience may look better, but health is not upgraded to the same degree. That said, at this point on the list, things are already far more comfortable than with the earlier names. Fishworks is not somewhere I need to warn against strongly. It simply reminds us of a very practical truth that better fish is not enough if the cooking does not change. And thankfully, from here onwards, there are several names far more worth considering where the eating experience and how the body feels begin to align much more closely with what people over 50 should be looking for. Number 6, Rockfish. This sixth name is quite similar to the previous one we explored. At a glance, Rockfish and Fishworks share many traits that make people group them together. Fresh fish, bright spaces, a sense that this is somewhere you eat properly rather than a rushed fryer. But the longer you sit, the more carefully you eat, the more you realise that Rockfish tells a different story in its own way. What Rockfish sells you first and foremost is not an upgrade, but freshness. They talk a lot about the sea, about fish just landed, about how tomorrow the fish will still be swimming offshore. And to be fair, the fish really is different. The flesh is firm, the smell of the sea is clear, with none of that frozen or over-processed feeling. For many people, especially older diners, that alone creates a strong sense of trust. You eat feeling that this is real, clean and reliable food. Because of that, Rockfish creates a very pleasant first impression. The spaces are usually open and bright, many branches looking straight out to sea. The pace of eating is slower and more relaxed. You do not feel rushed like in many other chains. For me, that is a clear positive. It turns the meal into an experience rather than just filling your stomach. But then comes the moment where you need to be honest with yourself. The fish may be very fresh, but when you order fish and chips, the chips are still chips. Still fried potatoes, still fast carbohydrates, still a considerable amount of oil. The batter around the fish is still traditional crisp but heavy after a few bites. If you eat slowly and pay attention to your body, you will notice that familiar feeling still appears no matter how good the fish is. I am not saying Rockfish is a bad choice. On the contrary, among fish and chips chains, this is a place where I feel more comfortable sitting down. Service is generally friendly. The atmosphere suits older customers, especially during seaside walks. But when it comes specifically to fish and chips, it has not escaped the familiar framework of oil, heavy frying and strong carbohydrates. Fresher fish alone is not enough to turn fish and chips into a light meal. It makes the dish better, more honest, but it does not change its nature. And once you realise that, you start to look at the next names with a different question. Not is the fish fresh, but have they really thought about my body in the way they cook this dish? That changing question is what leads us to the next position, a better choice and one far more worth considering. Number 7, Kingfisher. By the time we reach number 7, things genuinely feel much easier to breathe. Kingfisher is the kind of place that I believe many people over 50 in Britain have eaten at, or at least recognise on sight. Not noisy, not trying to impress, just a proper chippy in the truest sense. And most of the time it does exactly what people expect. You walk into Kingfisher in a fairly relaxed state of mind. No need to overthink, no need to scrutinise. The fish looks fine with no odd smell. The batter is reasonable, not too thick. The chips are hot edible and do not give off that unpleasant sense of old oil from the very first bite. This is the sort of place where you rarely feel the need to complain. You finish eating, stand up and go home without irritation or disappointment. That reliability is precisely why Kingfisher sits at this position. It does not shock, it does not generate scandals, and it does not cause your body to react immediately. For many older people, that alone is already a major advantage. You know what you are eating, and it does not make you anxious. But it is also because it is so familiar that Kingfisher has one point worth considering. Everything here is still done in the traditional chippy style. Fried fish, fried chips, salt added to suit general tastes. There are not many options to eat with less salt, and smaller portions for lighter eaters are rare. You order a portion and it is a portion designed for a healthy adult. The issue is not a single meal. If you eat here once in a while, Kingfisher is perfectly fine. But because it is so convenient and familiar, many people end up eating here week after week without thinking. And at that point, the oil and salt stop being about one meal and become a habit. Quietly, without warnings, but steadily accumulating. One thing I often see in people over 50 is that out of habit or reluctance to waste food, they finish their entire portion even when they do not really need that much. Kingfisher is not at fault here, but you need to know your own stopping point. Eating more slowly, leaving some of the chips or sharing a portion if possible can make your body feel far more comfortable. Number 8. Frankie's Fish and Chips. Why does a restaurant located in Shetland, far from the mainland, appear at number 8? On this list, I hear that question quite often, and honestly, it is completely reasonable. Shetland is not somewhere you casually drop by, and it is not a familiar destination for most older people in Britain. But Frankie's Fish and Chips is not known for its location. It is known for how it prepares its food. Frankie's has been awarded the title of UK's Best Fish and Chips, and this is not the sort of award that exists just to look good on the wall. It comes from doing the basics right consistently and with care. The fish here is genuinely fresh, sustainably caught with no frozen smell and no heavy-handed processing. When the dish arrives, you smell fish, not oil. For me, that alone is enough to create a good impression from the start. The way Frankie's makes fish and chips is very straightforward. No forced modern twists, no unnecessary complexity. The fish is fried just right, the batter is not overly thick, the oil is clean, and it does not feel greasy straight away. The chips are done in the traditional style, not too soft, and not burnt at the edges. This is the kind of food that makes you feel the person in the kitchen knows what they are doing and does it out of respect for the ingredients. What many older diners like about Frankie's is the sense of reassurance. The space is simple, not noisy and not rushed. You can sit, eat slowly and talk without feeling pressured. For those who care about where their food comes from, knowing that the fish is sustainably sourced also brings a certain peace of mind. You do not feel like you are eating carelessly, but Frankie's is not perfect for everyone. The only drawback and the reason it sits at number 8 rather than higher lies in the portion size. This is a very Scottish style portion, generous and quite large. For younger people or those who are very active, this is not a problem, but for people over 50, it can easily exceed what the body actually needs. What often happens at Frankie's is that you finish everything simply because it tastes good. The fish is good, the chips are good, and there is no obvious reason to stop. And because of that, you end up eating more than necessary without realizing it. This is not the restaurant's fault. It is something the diner needs to adjust themselves. You do not need to eat like a sailor who has just come ashore after a long voyage. By this point, our list is almost complete. And next I will introduce 2 names that I personally return to again and again. Number 9, Magpie Cafe Whitby. Magpie Cafe is not a name that needs loud advertising. It is famous in a very British way. Long established, consistently done with customers who return on their own and then bring others along. For many people over 50, this is the most trustworthy kind of reputation because it does not come from promises but from real experiences built up over many years. When the dish arrives, you immediately understand why this place is loved. The fish is fresh but not showy. The batter is crisp enough, not thick and not heavy. The chips are not piled into a mountain but sit neatly, feeling appropriate bite after bite. Everything on the plate feels considered. Nothing is added just to make the portion look impressive. What I value most about Magpie Cafe is not the flavour, but how you feel afterwards. When you finish eating, you are not desperately thirsty, you do not feel heavy-headed, and you do not need to find somewhere to sit and recover. You can stand up, take a walk chat and carry on with your day as normal. For people over 50, this is a very clear sign that the food is prepared with control. The portion size at Magpie Cafe is also a major positive. It is not about eating to excess or stuffing yourself. The portion is just right enough to feel satisfied without forcing you to finish at all costs. It is easy to stop at the right moment, and that creates a very comfortable feeling. At this age, stopping at the right time matters far more than clearing the plate. The service style also contributes greatly to the overall experience. No one rushes you and no one pushes you along. You do not feel like you are taking up space or slowing the restaurant down. Everything moves at a pace that allows you to truly enjoy your meal. Of course, Magpie Cafe has its limitations. It is not everywhere. If you want to eat there, you have to go to the right place. For many people, this is not somewhere you can visit every week. But that is a geographical limitation, not a quality one. And that is exactly what helps keep the experience special. Do you find this 9th name appealing? You might save it and plan a visit next time, but do not leave just yet. There is still one more option that is close to perfect, not just worth considering, but something everyone should try at least once. Number 10. Papa's Fish and Chips. After going through every kind of fish and chips, from meals that are far too salty and oily to places that treat fish with care but still leave the body feeling tired afterwards, I think we need a clear ending. If I had to choose the most relatively reassuring option for people over 50 in Britain, it would be Papa's Fish and Chips. Not because it is perfect, but because it is the place where I worry the least when I sit down and order. What truly sets Papa's apart from the rest of the industry comes down to a single number. It sounds simple, but it is actually extremely rare. A regular haddock and chips at Papa's is around 575 kilocalories. For fish and chips, that figure is almost unheard of. Most comparable meals elsewhere go far beyond this, and you are rarely told exactly how much you are eating. At Papa's, they do not avoid it or hide it. They publish the number openly. And for people over 50, this kind of transparency matters far more than any glossy marketing language. Publishing calories is not just for appearance. It shows that Papa's understands that today's diners, especially older ones, want control. You no longer eat on vague instinct alone. You know what you are putting into your body. You have the right to decide whether it suits you on that day. Across this entire list, very few places do this as honestly as Papa's. Papa's is also one of the few chains that genuinely designs its food for the diner rather than for impact. They offer senior meals, smaller portions that are easier to digest. This is not a token reduction, but a clear option on the menu. That says a great deal. It shows they understand that bodies over 50 do not need large portions to enjoy food. They need enough, they need balance, and they need to function normally afterwards. The space itself also plays a big role in this experience. Papa's restaurants are usually spacious, bright and clean. Seating is comfortable, walkways are easy, and the atmosphere is friendly to older diners. You can move slowly, eat slowly without feeling rushed. The meal does not create pressure to eat quickly or finish fast. This may seem like a small detail, but for many people over 50, it makes a very noticeable difference. Another thing I appreciate is Papa's small but thoughtful efforts. They serve 0 sugar drinks for the takeaway, reducing sugar in the overall meal options. This is not mandatory. and it certainly does not define the taste of the fish, but it shows they view the meal as a whole, not just fish and chips on a plate. Of course, calling Papa's the best option does not mean ignoring its drawbacks. Some branches fry chips in beef dripping. For people with cholesterol concerns, this is something to note. Salt is another factor. Even though it is more restrained than in many other places, you should still actively ask for no extra salt if you want better control. Papa's gives you the tools to choose, but you still need to use them consciously. This is exactly why I call Papa's the best, not the perfect. It is not the tastiest, the cheapest, or the most famous. It is the place that gives you control. In an industry where most things are done to a single formula for everyone, Papa's is one of the very few that stops to ask what the diner actually needs, especially those over 50. This is not an absolute ranking nor a right or wrong verdict for everyone. It is my personal perspective as someone who lives in Britain, has eaten fish and chips more than enough times, and is also a health professional who pays close attention to how the body changes once we pass the age of 50. I eat, I observe, and then I reflect on how my body responds after each meal. This list is therefore not intended to tear down any brand. Some names are ranked lower because they are not well suited to the health of older adults, but for younger people they may not be a problem at all. On the other hand, the places I rank higher are not necessarily the tastiest for everyone, but they are the ones where I finish eating and still feel light sleep better and do not find myself regretting it the next day. Do you agree with this order? Are there places where you feel I was too harsh or perhaps too lenient? Is there a fish and chips you have eaten your whole life that still feels fine, that your body seems to accept? I would genuinely like to hear your perspective, especially if you are also over 50. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We do not need to agree, but sharing real experiences helps others eat more intelligently. And if you find this kind of analysis useful, please subscribe to the channel. Here I am, not talking about extreme dieting, but about enjoying British food with awareness so that we stay well enough to keep enjoying it in the years ahead.